What if the wisdom you seek has been with you all along, not waiting in distant temples or future lifetimes, but resting silently beneath the surface of your own awareness? In Zen, not every realization begins with a blow or a blaze. Some awakenings arrive in stillness, not as thunder, but as moonlight reflected in a quiet well. These next stories invite you to pause and look within. There is no drama here, only the gentle unraveling of illusion. A merchant, surrounded by luxury, stumbles upon a treasure more valuable than gold. A nun, burdened by years of effort, finds awakening not in effort, but in a broken bucket and scattered moonlight. A master speaks not to others, but to himself, cutting through confusion with the simplest of voices. Stay awake. Here, even the Buddha listens in silence as an old woman questions his compassion. Even the act of lighting incense becomes a doorway. Nothing is forced. Nothing is added. These 5 stories don't teach us how to change who we are. They gently remind us of what we've never lost. Let us enter this still, clear space where wisdom reveals itself not through striving, but through seeing. Soyen Shaku and the Foundational Zen Principles in America. The year was 1893. A steamship glided across the vast Pacific, carrying with it not just passengers, but a quiet revolution. Among the travelers stood a dignified figure in flowing robes, a Japanese Zen monk named Soyen Shaku. He was on his way to Chicago to attend the World Parliament of Religions, the first Zen master to set foot on American soil. He stood at the ship's railing, the salt wind tugging gently at his sleeves. In his hands, a small leather-bound journal, pages fluttering as he wrote with slow, deliberate brushstrokes. He was not recording travel impressions or personal reflections. He was writing down the principles that had shaped his life, the living roots of his practice. Nearby stood a young man, his devoted student, D.T. Suzuki, who would one day become instrumental in bringing Zen to the West. "Master," Suzuki asked softly, "what are you writing?" Soyen turned, his gaze calm, clear. "I am writing the principles I live by. Not theory, not doctrine, just simple practices that carry the spirit of Zen into daily life." He handed the journal to Suzuki, who began reading. At first, he was surprised. The principles were ordinary. Rise early, light incense, meditate before dressing, eat moderately, never to full satisfaction. Greet guests the same way you dwell in solitude. Dwell in solitude the same way you greet guests. Say only what you live. Do only what you say. Do not miss opportunity, yet act with reflection. Have the fearless heart of a hero and the gentle soul of a child. Sleep as if it were your last. Rise as if discarding worn shoes. Suzuki looked up. "These are so simple." Soyen Shaku smiled faintly. "Simple, yes. Easy? No." Then he added, with a fire behind his quiet voice, "My heart burns like fire, but my eyes are as cold as dead ashes." That single line captured the essence of his practice. Fierce devotion without grasping, clarity without coldness. A paradox that was not a contradiction, but a harmony. Those handwritten principles would go on to form the backbone of Zen's arrival in the West, not as abstract philosophy, but as a way to live. And on that ship, between two worlds, Zen found its bridge. The Buddha and the elderly woman with firewood. The sun was high above the dusty road near the town of Sravasti when the Buddha and his disciples paused beneath the shade of a great banyan tree. The breeze carried the scent of ripening fruit and village fires, and travelers gathered quietly, hoping to hear a few words from the awakened one. Among the crowd came a slow figure, an elderly woman, hunched by age, her back bent beneath a bundle of firewood. Her hands were calloused from a life of labor, her face furrowed by sun and time. She set her load down beside the tree, her eyes fixed on the Buddha. But she didn't bow. Instead, she stood tall in spirit and said, "So, you are the Buddha, the one they say teaches kindness to all." "I am," he replied simply, with no hint of pride or performance. She narrowed her eyes. "I've watched you pass through our village. People bring you food and fall at your feet. They praise your compassion. But I've noticed something. When people are kind to you, you're kind back. When they praise you, you smile. When they honor you, you honor them." She paused. "That's not compassion. That's just trading pleasantries." The disciples stirred in discomfort, ready to defend their master. But the Buddha remained still, utterly present. Then, gently, he asked her, "If someone offers a gift, but you do not accept it, to whom does it belong?" "To the giver, of course," she replied. "And then so it is with anger and criticism," the Buddha said. "If I do not accept it, it remains with the one who offered it." The woman stared at him, her expression softening. "So you're not offended?" "Why would I be?" he answered. "You've offered me truth, and truth, even when it stings, is a gift." He bowed to her with real reverence. "You've reminded us all. Compassion means nothing if it's reserved only for the agreeable." The disciples watched in silence as the woman lifted her firewood and walked away, her back a little straighter. "That," the Buddha said quietly, "was one of our greatest teachers." Chiono and the Cracked Water Bucket. It was a quiet night at the mountain monastery. The moon hung full and luminous over the rooftops, casting silver light across stone paths and the edges of pine trees. Crickets sang softly in the distance, and the world seemed suspended in a moment of stillness. While the other nuns had gone to rest, Chiono, a young practitioner, made her way alone toward the well. In her hands, she carried a wooden bucket, worn smooth by years of use. She walked slowly, deliberately, practicing mindfulness with each step. For years, she had studied the teachings, memorized the sutras, sat in countless hours of meditation, and still, the enlightenment she longed for remained elusive, always just beyond reach, like mist dissolving before her fingers could close. "Maybe tonight," she thought, "in this simple task, I will understand." At the well, she lowered the bucket carefully. The water shimmered, reflecting the moon like a mirror in the dark. As she drew the bucket upward, she noticed it. A hairline crack near the bottom, barely visible. Already, droplets had begun to escape. She didn't stop. She placed the leaking bucket on her shoulder and walked back along the path, feeling the coolness of water trailing down her arm. Halfway to the kitchen, it happened. The bottom gave out completely. Water rushed out, soaking her robes, splashing across the stones. The bucket was suddenly light and useless. Chiono stood frozen. Then, something within her shifted. The moon was no longer reflected in a single bucket of water. It now danced in every puddle, every drop scattered on the path. In losing the container, she saw what had never been contained. Her breath caught. A quiet sound rose from her lips. Not laughter, not tears, but something from deeper still. A recognition that words could never hold. In that shattered moment, she awakened. Later, she would write, "No more water in the pail, no more moon in the water." And yet, Both the moon and the truth remained. Never bound, never broken, always here. Master Zuigan talks to himself. Each morning, as the mist curled through the bamboo groves surrounding the mountain temple, Master Zuigan would rise in silence. He moved through the wooden corridors like a shadow, present, unhurried, fully awake. But Zuigan had a peculiar habit. As the first light filled his room and dust shimmered in the air, he would sit on his meditation cushion, take a deep breath, and suddenly say aloud, "Master!" Then, after a pause, he'd answer himself, "Yes?" Another pause. "Stay awake?" "Yes." Then again, "Don't be fooled by others." "Yes." To an outsider, it might seem like a man losing his mind. But those who had practiced long enough knew Zuigan was not speaking to entertain. He was speaking to remember. He wasn't lost. He was pointing, not outward, but inward. He knew how easy it was to fall asleep while still walking, how the mind slips into old habits, social masks, the endless noise of thought. By calling out Master, he was summoning his true nature, that deep, clear awareness that sees without distortion. And by answering, he was recognizing it. Not the self that clings or compares, but the one that simply is, before words, before roles, before opinions. One day, a young monk overheard the strange ritual and asked about it. Zuigan simply smiled and said, "The true master never leaves you, but we forget." So I remind myself. No chanting, no robes, no audience, just one man calling himself back to what never left. This wasn't madness. It was mindfulness made audible. The merchant Tanaka finds his inner treasure. The autumn wind rustled through the temple garden as crimson leaves drifted to the ground like forgotten thoughts. Lanterns glowed softly under the eaves. Within the temple of Engakuji, Master Soen Shaku sat in quiet stillness, brush poised above parchment. A visitor arrived, not a monk, not a seeker, but a wealthy merchant named Tanaka, dressed in embroidered silk, rings on his fingers, and a familiar restlessness in his eyes. He bowed politely and sat across from the master. "I have everything," Tanaka began. "Warehouses, ships, wealth beyond measure. Yet, I am not at peace. I wake with anxiety. I sleep with fear. I've come seeking a teaching that can bring me lasting contentment." Soen Shaku listened without interruption. Tanaka continued, "If you can offer me wisdom, I will make a generous donation to your temple." The master said nothing. Instead, he rose and motioned for Tanaka to follow. They walked silently to a small window overlooking the temple's Zen garden, raked gravel, a few stones, a single maple tree. "What do you see?" the master asked. "A well-arranged garden," Tanaka replied. "This garden," Soen Shaku said, "is made not by adding, but by removing. What remains is essential, still, whole." Then he pointed to a calligraphy scroll hanging nearby. Tanaka couldn't read the characters, so the master translated, "Open your own treasure house." Tanaka blinked. "What treasure?" "The one you've always had," the master said. "But you've been looking everywhere else." Tanaka sat in silence, for a breath, then two, and something within him shifted. Not a grand enlightenment, but the quiet sense that the search could finally end, that nothing needed to be earned, that peace was not bought, but uncovered. He bowed deeply, not as a merchant seeking advantage, but as a man finally touching ground. When he placed his donation before the master, Soen Shaku gently added, Give only if it flows from the treasure you've now seen, not from guilt, not from bargain, but from fullness. Tanaka smiled. For the first time in years, his hands were empty, and his heart was full. Not all awakenings come in fire or bamboo strikes. Some arrive quietly, like the moon reflected in still water, like a whispered reminder at dawn, where truth isn't found, but simply seen. These stories remind us, what we seek does not live outside of us. We need only pause, listen, and return inward. Because the treasure was never locked. We just forgot the way in.